Well, good afternoon. This has been quite a day. So much to take in. It's been a delight to be part of it. My name is Andrea McCardle. I'm honored to be a member of this consortium representing CUNY Law School. I'd like to first acknowledge my consortium colleagues under the leadership of Professors Hum and Hendry for their dedicated work. I'd like to thank Tria Case, the University Director of the Sustainability Initiative, whom we heard from this morning, and Tamara Schneider, the CUNY Associate Vice Chancellor for Research, for their opening remarks. And of course, our keynote speaker, Council Member Konstantinides, for an inspiring talk. I want to make sure I thank the wonderful IT team who has guided us throughout this process. And I want to applaud our three panels of presenters for sharing with us and illuminating for us the work that's being done by these community-based organizations that they represent. As we've heard, these organizations are committed to improving the quality of life in Queens, throughout Queens. So we've learned a lot today about how these organizations are striving to improve the quality of life in Queens. And they're doing that in a number of ways, through advocating for development policies that are both environmentally and economically sustainable and responsive to local needs and priorities, in supporting measures that reduce environmental harm and the risks associated with climate change. And third, in promoting democratic engagement around these issues through the amplifying of community voices. I think all three prongs of their presentations, their presentations really engage with all of these issues. They were, I think, of equal importance, and these themes continue to emerge throughout the day. Most of these organizations are fairly recently formed, or possibly reincarnated versions of earlier groups. And so they're very much 21st century organizations that are dealing with contemporary environmental challenges that continue to evolve. As I was reflecting today on the breadth of their work and the significance of their work, I was reminded that the set of ideas and initiatives and projects that we're considering under the umbrella of sustainability are broad and intersectional and interdisciplinary. That was certainly borne out as we heard from our presenters, who comprise organizers, activists, city planners, a lawyer, financial services professional, business entrepreneurs, educators, an artist, a filmmaker, and more, bringing to bear all of their talents, their community knowledge, their deep community knowledge, and their experience to this work. Many of them are wearing multiple hats, so they're working deeply in these organizations and doing this other work as well. So just to recap what our panels shared with us and some of the areas where they might seek to perhaps work more with CUNY. The first panel, the New York City Planning, ULURP, and Environmental Justice panel, a common theme was the importance of having a community-informed vision for planning and development, and community-based economic development that was founded upon local needs. And that this community work would then guide the formulation of planning and zoning measures that would be proposed by city agencies. And we heard this certainly in the presentations of Justice for All Coalition and the Flushing Anti-Displacement Alliance, organizing against, in particular, Flushing Alliance, organizing against the special Flushing Waterfront District. And in the advocacy of Queens Neighborhood United and Chaya CDC, advocating for working class immigrant residents, primarily in the Jackson Heights area. We saw a focus on ensuring that these residents have a voice in decisions about development, and development that affords racial justice and neighborhood equity, such as in the campaigns against Target and Amazon that both groups were involved in. The advocacy of these organizations encompasses public campaigns, initiating lawsuits, supporting legislation. They're involved in all aspects of this kind of advocacy. We learned about the role that CUNY students have played in some of these campaigns. And in fact, Abigail is an alum of LaGuardia, and Kristen who was speaking for the Justice for All Coalition, is a PH candidate at the CUNY Graduate Center. So we're very proud to see our own CUNY students so involved in this work. And we heard about potential ways that CUNY can provide support to these organizations, including research, technical expertise, tracking the rezonings, which are always afoot, mold and mildew testing, which is certainly an issue in many of the high-rise buildings, including the many NYCHA developments in Western Queens, which is really a base for the Justice for All Coalition group. Social surveys, the Green New Deal for public housing assessments, which is something that we're looking forward to happening, and much more. So I think that the groups who presented in that first panel, gave us a blueprint for things that I think we, as a CUNY community, faculty and students, and the administration can be involved in and can be supportive of. In the second panel, coastal resilience, green infrastructure, and community voices, we heard from organizations that focused directly on several overlapping environmental issues. We benefited from the Newtown Creek Alliance's Mitch Waxman's incredible historical knowledge as he mapped the sites of pollution at Newtown Creek, and he gave us such insights about the infrastructure deficits that must be addressed in any serious effort at remediation. We learned from Rebecca Pryor of the Guardians of Flushing Bay about the Guardians' advocacy for healthy and sustainable use of Flushing Bay and its ecosystems. And also because of the combined sewer overflow issue, which Rebecca was able to detail for us, and we could see the serious impact that it had, the need for building, maintaining, and incentivizing green infrastructure. And that might be an area where CUNY might be able to provide some support. We heard from Judah Asimov of RISE's efforts at improving both the natural and built environment. We learned its projects include some very interesting repurposing and transforming of spaces, which we would love to actually see in person when we can do that. We saw how RISE draws lessons from the impacts of Superstorm Sandy, because certainly that area of the Rockaways was very heavily impacted by Sandy. We saw their initiatives to promote community stewardship. Judah flagged as an issue of possible future collaboration, the possible need for managed retreat. In other words, retreat from continued occupancy of certain parts of the low-lying Rockaway Peninsula, given not only ongoing flooding risks, but the increasing risks posed by sea level rise. So this may be an area where there could be some potential collaboration. We heard from Emily Sharp, who outlined Stop Sunnyside Yards' campaign against the massive decking over of rail yards that would bring a massive high-rise development with enormous implications for infrastructure, for environmental health, and the quality of life. Emily, who, by the way, is an alum of CUNY Law School, I wanted to mention that as well. We're proud of that. Is looking for help in a variety of ways. And she pointed to things where there could be collaboration and support, perhaps in developing a community-based feasibility study to counter the feasibility study that was done by the EDC. And she also flagged, as did other presenters, the mental health impacts of long-term exposure to environmental risks. And in the case of Sunnyside Yards, that building project would be done over a very extensive period of time if it comes to pass. So thinking about what kind of researches would be necessary or at least helpful in trying to identify and mitigate these kinds of impacts. This group, this particular panel, had a very engaged generative discussion after their individual presentations, highlighting the challenges facing all of the presenters' work, all of their organizations. In particular, they cited planning fatigue, noting the length of time that engaged community planning actually requires. And so that's a reality that we need to consider. It was also suggested that the proposed comprehensive planning legislation might be something that we should be taking a closer look at. This panel ended with an agreement on the need for network building, and I second that idea, that network building is going to be critical to sustain the kind of sustainability initiatives that we're thinking about today. And in our third panel, public health and quality of life for all in Queens. What was thematic, I think, in this panel were the the committed efforts of all these organizations to promote environmental health and safety. We see in the work of the QSWAB, it's a solid waste advisory board. It's a citizens advisory board committed to ultimately zero waste future, and its efforts to address the serious problems created by solid waste transfer stations being located in such close proximity to residential areas. And the advocacy they've done around that has been impressive, and there's more work they indicate that needs to be done. We saw another representative from Newtown Creek, Willis Elkins, focusing on critical work such as monitoring water quality at this Superfund site. And interestingly, they are already working with LaGuardia College and students in doing that testing. So we have a collaboration going on there, and we hope to do more of that. Willis highlighted some of the serious health issues that remain as a result of the pollution that has occurred over the years at this industrial waterway at the border of northern Brooklyn and western Queens. We've heard from Barbara Brown and the Eastern Queens Alliance. Among the many things that they're doing, there's managing an initiative that's soon to come online, I believe, the Idlewild Park Environmental Science Learning Center and Wetlands Preserve. That looks like a wonderful resource for the community, a wonderful source of public education. Barbara also addressed during her presentation serious problems of air and noise pollution from JFK, which is in close proximity. And she raised concerns about the fact that there's going to be redevelopment of the airport to the tune of perhaps $13 billion, and there's no set aside for the community. No community benefits agreement to date has been negotiated, and that might be another area where CUNY might be able to provide some support or assistance. So we want to keep that in mind. And we heard from, and I want to mention, we had two wonderful speakers from QSWAB, and I thank them both, Mac Lawrence and Andrea Scarborough, for their thoughtful insights. And in fact, we had, from Mac, we had some additional suggestions about things that we might be able to do from CUNY's end, access to research databases, technology, networking, funding, if that's available, and also importantly, cultural sensitivity and respect for the knowledge of communities who are living with issues and know the most about them. And so I think that's a really important point. And then we heard from Anthony Ng at the Queens Climate Project, which might be the newest organization. And they're taking on a range of climate policy issues, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, real commitment to the use of renewable energy, implementing a just transition to a net zero carbon emissions energy system. And the work of these organizations is often unheralded, but they're providing critically important benefits to the Queens communities they serve. Anthony suggested that there were a number of things that, again, CUNY might be involved in, including increasing the use of solar energy and advocacy against the reopening of the NRG plant. So there's just much work out there, many potential areas of collaboration that we can imagine. So, given the magnitude of the environmental planning and economic equity issues that our presenting organizations have committed to, it's clear that we do need all hands on deck, as Council Member Constantinides also observed today. A goal of this consortium is to identify how CUNY might contribute to this work. Again, what research, data analysis, field work that our faculty and students might contribute to. You've given us a lot of food for thought, many suggestions that we can think further about. And with that in mind, we are planning a second program. It's going to be held on Friday, April 16th, in which we will have presenters from CUNY who will share work that we think is related to some of the work and some of the priorities that your organizations have, where they might similarly address community needs and priorities that were discussed today. So that's a goal that we're looking toward. We're envisioning a phase 2, in other words, of this roundtable to keep us in conversation with our presenters, with the hope that we will see ways in which CUNY can support and amplify the crucial community-informed work that you're doing and expand capacity to engage in planning and policy interventions on environmental sustainability and climate justice work, and to continue to think about what a sustainable future for all the communities of Queens would entail. These conversations and potential collaborations could also encompass working with city government agencies, what Council Member Constantinides outlined in discussing how, for example, the Climate Mobilization Act and the Renewable Rikers legislation came to pass. He said it was really a collaborative effort that involved community organizations, and certainly with respect to Renewable Rikers, there was a role that CUNY played with my colleague Rebecca Bradsby's and the law students, and also the work of CUNY Sustainability Tree of Cases project that we heard about earlier today. So there does seem to be tremendous potential for future collaboration. That is something that we at CUNY would like to explore more with respect and humility and gratitude for the presentations that we've heard today. And so what I'll say in wrapping up is stay tuned for phase 2 or part 2 of this roundtable. And before I conclude, I just wanted to ask if any of my consortium colleagues wanted to join in or share a thought.
I was saying thank you very much for the summary. It was very well done, and you really pulled it together on the fly as the talks were being given. Great. And I also want to thank all the panelists for taking their time, better part of a day, to contribute to this. It's great. And we're looking forward to, with our next meeting, to see how we can more or less knit together the CUNY schools with the needs of the community. That's really the objective of this, particularly with regard to the problem of climate change.